There's a version of you that exists only in performance. It knows exactly which opinions to share at dinner parties, which aspects of your life to highlight on social media, which parts of yourself to hide to maintain the image. This performed self has become so sophisticated that you barely notice the constant calculations anymore, the split-second assessments of, will this make me look good, before every word leaves your mouth. You've become a master of reading rooms, shape-shifting to match expectations, sculpting your entire existence around an invisible question, am I acceptable? But what if this exhausting performance is precisely what's preventing you from ever becoming real? Friedrich Nietzsche, the philosopher who demolished comfortable illusions about human nature, argued that most people are psychological slaves, not to kings or governments, but to the tyranny of others' opinions. He claimed that the desperate need for approval keeps you trapped in what he called herd morality, a state where you measure your worth entirely by external validation, living according to values you never chose, becoming anyone except yourself. Those rare individuals who broke free discovered something revolutionary. They stopped asking, what will they think of me? And started asking, what do I actually value? They walked away from prestigious careers that impressed everyone but destroyed their souls. They spoke truths that created uncomfortable silences but aligned with their deepest convictions. They became what Nietzsche called free spirits, not selfish or reckless, but sovereign over their own existence, authors of their own values rather than actors in someone else's script. In this video, we'll explore Nietzsche's radical philosophy of self-authorship, how approval-seeking is a form of psychological slavery that most people never escape, why your need for validation reveals a terrifying emptiness at your core, and the brutal but necessary process of becoming the author of your own life. You'll discover the specific practices Nietzsche used to forge genuine autonomy, the dark psychological confrontation that awaits when you actually stop performing, and what it means to live as if you'd repeat your choices eternally. If you're new to the channel and haven't subscribed yet, click the subscribe button and like this video to support our work. Thank you for your support. Now, let's begin this journey into dangerous freedom. Picture a marionette theater. Hundreds of strings attached to a single figure, each one pulled by a different hand. Parents, peers, social media, cultural norms, religious doctrine, professional expectations. The figure moves, but not of its own accord. It dances to rhythms it never chose. This was Nietzsche's vision of the modern human condition, a creature so entangled in external demands that it has forgotten it once had the capacity to move itself. Nietzsche observed something disturbing in his contemporaries, and the pattern has only intensified in our hyper-connected age. He noticed that people had become what he called actors of morality, performing goodness rather than creating it, following scripts written by others rather than authoring their own values. The applause they sought wasn't even real. It was the imagined approval of an audience that might not exist or care. Consider the young professional who pursues law because it satisfies parental expectations, though her soul yearns for artistic expression. She masters the performance, the right clothes, the right vocabulary, the right opinions at dinner parties. She becomes skilled at reading rooms, at shape-shifting to match the values of whoever holds power. Yet each night, in the silence before sleep, a question whispers, who am I when no one is defining me? Or examine the man who posts his life online, each image curated for maximum validation. He doesn't experience moments, he photographs them for future approval. His vacations are backdrops for content. His relationships are material for storytelling. He has outsourced his sense of self-worth to an algorithm that measures his value in hearts and thumbs. Nietzsche would have recognized this instantly, the herd animal seeking safety in numbers, terrified of standing alone. According to Nietzsche, this isn't weakness. It's the inevitable result of what he called slave morality, a value system inherited from religious and social conditioning that teaches you to judge yourself by external standards of good and evil, right and wrong. You've been trained since childhood to look outside yourself for the answer to the question, am I worthy? The answer was always meant to come from others, never from within. In his clinical observations of 19th century Europeans, Nietzsche witnessed an epidemic of what we might now call existential emptiness. Successful people who felt hollow, moral people who felt fraudulent, religious people who had lost all genuine connection to the divine. They had followed all the rules, won all the approvals, and arrived at a destination they never chose, wondering why the victory felt like defeat. The people who actually transformed weren't the ones who tried harder to meet expectations. They were the ones who underwent what Nietzsche called a revaluation of all values, a radical questioning of every belief, every should, every inherited moral commandment. They didn't adjust their performance. They walked off the stage entirely. They stopped asking, "What should I do?" and started asking, "What do I will?" Yet most people mistake adjustment for transformation. They switch from seeking approval from parents to seeking it from peers, from religion to therapy culture, from one authority to another. They read self-help books that promise authenticity while providing new scripts to follow, new performances to perfect. They attend workshops on finding yourself that offer prepackaged identities to adopt. The cage gets redecorated, but the bars remain. Nietzsche understood that true freedom requires something far more dangerous, the willingness to stand alone in your values, to become what he called the overman or Übermensch, not a superior being, but one who has overcome the need for external validation and learned to create meaning from within. This isn't about rejecting all social connection. It's about no longer allowing the judgment of others to define the core of who you are. The path forward requires confronting a terrifying question. If you removed every opinion, every expectation, every inherited belief about who you should be, what would remain? Most people never ask this question because they intuit the answer might be nothing. They sense an emptiness where a self should be. But Nietzsche argued that this emptiness isn't the problem, it's the starting point. If you identified with this pattern of perpetual performance, click the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thank you for your support. Now, let's explore what Nietzsche discovered in his own confrontation with this void. The solution isn't being yourself. That phrase is meaningless to someone who has never existed outside of others' definitions. Nietzsche understood that you can't discover an authentic self buried beneath the conditioning. You must create it. He introduced a concept that revolutionized philosophy, amor fati, the love of fate, and its companion principle, the eternal recurrence. The idea that you should live as if you'll repeat this exact life infinitely, making choices you'd be willing to relive forever. This wasn't abstract philosophy for Nietzsche. It emerged from his own biographical crucible. In 1879, at age 34, he resigned from his prestigious professorship at Basel University due to severe health problems, migraines, vision issues, digestive troubles that modern scholars suspect were psychosomatic manifestations of psychological conflict. But rather than seeking another institution that would validate his worth, he made a radical choice. He would live in poverty and obscurity, writing books that no one read, pursuing truth rather than approval. For the next 10 years, Nietzsche lived in cheap boarding houses across Europe, Switzerland, Italy, France, moving with the seasons, often alone, writing in near total isolation. He would wake before dawn, write for hours in dim light that tortured his failing eyes, then walk for hours through mountains, thinking. He had no colleagues, no academic community, no audience. His books sold fewer than 100 copies each. His family thought he was wasting his life. This wasn't a romantic retreat or a spiritual quest. It was grueling, often miserable work. Nietzsche suffered from constant physical pain, financial anxiety, and the psychological torment of producing work he believed was important while watching it disappear into complete indifference. He had no evidence he was right about anything. No external validation confirmed his path. He existed in radical uncertainty, with only his own will to sustain him. In that isolation, Nietzsche confronted what he called the death of God, not literal atheism, but the collapse of external sources of meaning and morality. Without divine commandments, without social approval, without institutional validation, what remains? Most people facing this void rush back to some form of authority. They replace God with ideology, religion with therapy culture, traditional morality with social media consensus. The content changes, the structure of dependence remains. But Nietzsche chose differently. He decided to become what he called a free spirit, someone who creates their own values rather than inheriting them, who says yes to life on their own terms rather than on terms dictated by others. This wasn't about rejecting all morality. It was about taking responsibility for authoring your moral framework rather than outsourcing that authority to the crowd. The process revealed something dark. Beneath his respectable academic persona, beneath his dutiful son identity, beneath his nice guy social performance, there were desires and perspectives that horrified the conventional world. He questioned everything considered sacred: Christian morality, which he called a system designed to make the powerful feel guilty and the weak feel virtuous; democracy, which he saw as the tyranny of mediocrity; compassion itself, which he argued was often a disguise for the will to dominate. Nietzsche used a powerful metaphor for this process: the transformation of the camel into the lion into the child. The camel bears the weight of thou shalt, all the obligations and duties imposed by society. The lion says, I will. It fights for freedom and rejects external commandments. But the ultimate transformation is into the child, who creates new values through play, through innocent yes-saying to life, through what Nietzsche called self-overcoming. What emerged from his isolation was a philosophy that would eventually reshape Western thought. The idea that strength isn't measured by how well you conform to external standards, but by your capacity to create your own. That morality isn't discovered but invented. That meaning isn't given but generated through the courageous act of choosing what you stand for, regardless of whether anyone else agrees. According to Nietzsche, this process can't happen through discussion groups or self-help seminars. It requires what he called philosophy with a hammer, the systematic destruction of comfortable illusions, the willingness to think thoughts that make you unpopular, the courage to live according to principles that might isolate you. It requires that you become dangerous to yourself before you can become free. The effectiveness of this path depends on three conditions. First, you must be willing to endure prolonged solitude without rushing back to the safety of consensus. Second, you must develop what Nietzsche called intellectual conscience, the refusal to believe anything simply because it's comforting or socially acceptable. Third, you must cultivate the strength to bear the weight of your own values without external confirmation that you're right. So the question becomes practical. How do you actually undergo this transformation? How do you move from performing for others to authoring your own existence? Nietzsche didn't offer a gentle path, but he did offer a systematic one. Self-authorship isn't a feeling or a realization, it's a practice, a discipline as rigorous as any physical training. Nietzsche understood that you can't think your way out of approval seeking. You must act your way out, building new patterns through deliberate choices that rewire your relationship to external validation. What's required is a structured approach to what he called becoming who you are, not discovering a hidden self, but forging one through intentional practice. The process requires architecture. Without structure, good intentions dissolve into the same old patterns within weeks. You tell yourself you'll stop seeking approval, then find yourself editing a text message for the 5th time, calculating how it will be received. You commit to living authentically, then discover you're performing authenticity for an imagined audience. Transformation demands concrete practices repeated until they become your new operating system. Here are 4 pillars that translate Nietzschean philosophy into daily practice, each designed to systematically dismantle approval seeking and build genuine self-authorship. The practice of solitary values. Clarification each morning. Before you encounter any external input, before social media, news, or conversation, spend 20 minutes writing responses to this question. If I knew no one would ever know my answer, what do I actually value most? Write without editing, without judging whether your values are impressive or correct. Nietzsche called this learning to see, developing the capacity to perceive your own desires and convictions without the distorting lens of others' expectations. Track patterns over weeks. You're not seeking approval for these values, you're discovering what you choose in a state of radical freedom. The elimination of explanatory behavior. For 1 week, refuse to explain or justify your choices unless someone has a genuine practical need for the information. Notice how often you preemptively defend decisions, offer unsolicited rationale, or perform reasoning designed to win approval. When someone questions your choice and you feel the urge to justify, simply say, "That's what I chose," and resist elaboration. This isn't rudeness, it's the practice of letting your choices stand on their own authority. Nietzsche recognized that over-explanation is a symptom of internal doubt, a signal that you're still seeking external validation for decisions that should require only your own conviction. The discipline of selective visibility. Identify 3 domains of your life where you habitually perform for approval, perhaps your social media presence, your professional persona, or your romantic relationships. In each domain, implement 1 truth test. Share something true that you'd normally hide because it doesn't fit the image you maintain. Post content you genuinely care about rather than what generates engagement. Speak an unpopular opinion you actually hold at work. Reveal a vulnerability in your relationship that you've been managing through performance. Nietzsche called this the courage for the forbidden, not recklessness, but the willingness to be seen as you are rather than as you're expected to be. The practice of decision. Documentation. At the end of each day, write brief responses to these prompts. What did I choose today based on what I genuinely wanted versus what would gain approval? When did I feel most myself versus most performed? If I were to live this day on repeat for eternity, what would I change? This daily inventory creates what Nietzsche called intellectual conscience, the habit of self-examination that prevents you from sleepwalking through life according to others' scripts. You're not judging these choices as good or bad. You're developing awareness of the gap between performed self and emerging authentic self. Nietzsche himself practiced a version of these disciplines during his decade of isolation. He would rise early, write his genuine thoughts without concern for reception, walk for hours in solitude processing ideas, and live according to principles that isolated him from professional and social acceptance. He wasn't trying to be difficult, he was committed to the supremacy of his own judgment over collective opinion. The effectiveness of these practices requires two conditions. First, consistency over at least 90 days, long enough for new neural patterns to form. Second, a willingness to tolerate the discomfort that inevitably arises when you stop performing. You'll feel exposed, anxious, sometimes certain you're making mistakes. These feelings aren't signs you're failing, they're evidence the process is working. But here's where the philosophy becomes visceral. These practices will trigger a confrontation more intense than you anticipate. Because beneath the performance, beneath the approval seeking, there's a psychological structure that has been keeping you safe, and it will not give up control without a fight. The real test isn't intellectual, it's the dark night of the soul that arrives when you actually stop seeking validation. Let's explore what Nietzsche understood about that confrontation. The practices begin working, and then something unexpected happens. The world becomes eerily quiet. You post something genuine rather than curated, and instead of liberation, you feel vertigo. You stop explaining your choices, and instead of confidence, you feel untethered. You've removed the external reference points that told you who you were, and suddenly you're suspended in a void with no coordinates, no map, no confirmation you exist. This is the moment Nietzsche warned about, what he called the loneliest loneliness. The real test isn't whether you can follow the practices, it's whether you can endure what they reveal. Because once you stop performing for approval, you discover how much of your identity was constructed from others' responses to you. Remove those responses and there's a terrifying emptiness where a self should be. You're not discovering who you are, you're confronting the fact that you might be nothing. The psychological pain that emerges at this stage is specific and acute. It's not the surface anxiety of what will they think. It's the existential terror of without their thoughts. Do I exist at all? You feel like you're dissolving, like the boundaries that defined you were only maintained through constant external reinforcement. Nietzsche called this the death of the old self, and he insisted it couldn't be skipped or softened. You must actually die to who you were before you can become something new. Your mind will attempt elaborate sabotage. It will tell you that authenticity is selfishness, that you're being unreasonable, that you need to consider others' feelings. It will dress up approval-seeking in the language of virtue, compassion, social responsibility, emotional intelligence. It will convince you that the discomfort means you're doing something wrong, that you should go back to performing, that real maturity means adapting to social expectations. But if you resist these rationalizations and stay with the practices, something begins to emerge from the void. Not immediately, not obviously, but gradually, a sense of your own will independent of external confirmation. You make a choice, feel the anxiety of no one validating it, and then notice you're still here. You didn't evaporate. The choice stands, solid, requiring no justification beyond the fact that you made it. Nietzsche wrote, "One must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star." This is that chaos, the dissolution of your performed identity, the collapse of the approval-based self, the disintegration of borrowed values. Most people experience this chaos as crisis and immediately reconstruct the old structures. They switch approval sources but maintain the fundamental pattern. They perform authenticity instead of performing conventionality, but they're still performing. The function of this discomfort is precise. It's burning away everything that isn't actually you. Every time you feel the absence of approval and don't collapse, you're building what Nietzsche called will to power. Not power over others, but the capacity to be the source of your own values and meanings. You're discovering that you can generate worth from within rather than extracting it from external sources. What emerges in these moments of sustained discomfort are insights you couldn't access through thinking alone. You realize that most of your beliefs aren't beliefs at all. They're defensive positions designed to keep you acceptable. You discover desires you've been suppressing because they didn't fit your performed identity. You recognize that much of what you called caring about others was actually managing their perception of you. These realizations are brutal, but they're also the ground truth you need to build anything authentic. The discomfort serves another function. It filters out everyone who was only attracted to your performance. Friends who drift away weren't really seeing you, they were relating to the character you played. Professional connections that fade weren't invested in your actual capacities, they were invested in your compliance. Romantic partners who disappear weren't in love with you, they were in love with your availability for their projections. What Nietzsche called the revaluation of all values necessarily includes a revaluation of all relationships. You must come to understand that this discomfort isn't a problem to solve. It's the birth canal of genuine selfhood. You can't bypass it with techniques or insights or support systems. You have to go through it alone in the dark, with no guarantee you'll emerge intact. Nietzsche himself spent years in this crucible, writing books no one read, living principles no one affirmed, sustaining himself on nothing but his own conviction that the path was worthwhile. The transformation has a specific marker. The moment you make a choice that you know will disappoint or confuse people you care about, feel the full weight of their potential disapproval, and choose your own path anyway. Not out of rebellion, but out of fidelity to your own will. That's when you know something fundamental has shifted. You haven't become indifferent to others. You've become sovereign over your own life. And that sovereignty, Nietzsche argued, is the only ground from which genuine relationships and contributions can emerge. Let's explore what that transformed existence actually looks like. The transformation doesn't announce itself with trumpets or epiphanies. It happens slowly, almost imperceptibly, like the way dawn changes the quality of darkness. One morning you wake up and realize you haven't checked for validation in days. You made choices yesterday without the internal committee meeting to calculate approval. You spoke your actual thoughts in a conversation without editing for reception. The performance has stopped, not through effort, but through obsolescence. Then comes the moment of return. You re-enter the social world after this internal transformation, and something strange happens. You expect people to notice the profound changes, to comment on your newfound freedom, to acknowledge the death and rebirth you've undergone. But they don't. In fact, many people seem confused or even uncomfortable with your presence now. The character they knew has been replaced by something they can't quite categorize. The irony is sharp. You've done the deepest work of your life, transformed your entire relationship to yourself and the world, and to many observers, you've just become difficult. You no longer laugh at jokes you find unfunny. You don't nod along with opinions you disagree with. You don't perform enthusiasm for activities that bore you. You've become honest in a way that makes people who are still performing feel exposed by contrast. The people who were invested in your old identity will resist this transformation most intensely. They'll tell you you've changed, and they won't mean it as a compliment. They'll say you're being selfish, or you're going through a phase, or you need to balance your authenticity with consideration for others. What they're really saying is, your refusal to perform anymore makes my own performance harder to sustain. You discover you've developed qualities that disturb comfortable consensus. An unwillingness to pretend agreement to keep peace, an immunity to social pressure that others find unsettling, a directness in communication that people mistake for rudeness because they're accustomed to coded performances, a clarity about your values that makes those still seeking external validation feel judged by comparison, even though you're not judging at all. The return is anticlimactic for the world, but revolutionary for you. You're no longer interested in impressing people with your transformation. You don't need to explain or justify the changes. You simply show up as you are. Not the performed version, not the character designed for approval, but the self you forged in solitude. Nietzsche called this becoming who you are. And the paradox is that other people often liked who you were pretending to be better than who you actually are. But something shifts in your presence that's undeniable, an authenticity that reads as charisma, not because you're trying to be charismatic, but because you're no longer trying to be anything. People either feel deeply drawn to this quality or deeply threatened by it. There's no middle ground. You've become what Nietzsche called a free spirit, someone who moves through the world according to their own compass, not immune to others' opinions, but no longer governed by them. Nietzsche wrote, "The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. If you try it, you will be lonely often and sometimes frightened. But no price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself. You understand this now in your bones, not as philosophy, but as lived reality. The loneliness is real, but it's different from the loneliness of performance. It's the solitude of self-possession rather than the isolation of self-abandonment. You discover you no longer need to prove anything to anyone. Not because you've transcended ego or achieved some spiritual state, but because you've learned to generate worth internally rather than extracting it from external sources. Approval, when it comes, is pleasant but not necessary. Disapproval, when it comes, is noted but not defining. You've become what Nietzsche called a star, self-luminous, radiating your own light rather than reflecting borrowed shine. The most surprising change is this. You find yourself less judgmental of others still trapped in approval seeking because you remember how completely you were trapped yourself. You see them performing and feel compassion rather than contempt. You recognize that they're suffering in ways they can't articulate, imprisoned in identities they never chose, and you know that freedom can't be given. It must be claimed through the same brutal process you underwent. Your transformed presence begins affecting those around you in ways you don't control or intend. Some people start questioning their own performances after watching you stop yours. Others become defensive, attacking your authenticity as if it's a judgment on their lives. A few rare souls recognize what you've done and begin their own journeys. You're no longer trying to change anyone, but your very existence has become a kind of permission for others to stop pretending. The transformation reveals something profound. You're not special or superior for having done this work. You're simply awake in a way you weren't before. You've stopped sleepwalking through a life designed by others and started consciously creating your own path. And while that path may look unremarkable from outside, from inside it's the difference between existence and life, between performance and presence, between being lived and living. What Nietzsche called self-overcoming wasn't about becoming a better version of the person others wanted you to be. It was about developing the courage to become someone others might not want at all, someone who threatens comfortable consensus by refusing to participate in collective performances, someone who chooses authenticity over acceptance. Someone who authors their own values rather than inheriting them from the crowd. This is the most dangerous form of freedom. Not freedom from responsibilities or consequences, but freedom from the need for external validation. It's the freedom to be judged, to be misunderstood, to be rejected by people you care about, and to choose your own path anyway. Not because you don't feel the pain of disapproval, but because you've learned that the pain of self-abandonment is far worse. Nietzsche spent his final productive decade living this philosophy in radical isolation, writing books that almost no one read, developing ideas that wouldn't be appreciated until after his mental collapse. He had no way of knowing his work would eventually reshape Western philosophy. He continued not because of external confirmation, but because of internal necessity, because the alternative was betraying everything he believed about human potential and dignity. True freedom, according to Nietzsche, isn't the ability to do whatever you want without consequence. It's the strength to want what you choose, to own your desires and values without needing others to validate them, to create meaning through your own will rather than discovering it in external sources. It's the capacity to say, "This is what I stand for," and to bear the weight of that declaration without requiring applause. Your best version isn't the one that gains the most approval or achieves the most success by conventional metrics or makes the most people comfortable. Your best version is the one that's most genuinely yours, the self-forged through confrontation with your own void, the values created through your own philosophical labor, the life lived according to principles you'd be willing to affirm eternally. This version might be less popular, less successful by external measures, less understood by those who knew the performed you. What emerges from this transformation is a presence that can't be faked or taught or given as a gift. It's earned through the willingness to stand alone in your values, to endure the death of your performed identity, to create meaning in the absence of external validation. You become someone who no longer asks, "What should I do?" but instead declares, "This is what I will." Someone who has moved from the slavery of approval seeking to the sovereignty of self-authorship. This isn't the end of your journey, it's the beginning of what Nietzsche called the eternal recurrence of the same, living each day as if you'd repeat it forever, making choices you'd be willing to relive eternally. The question isn't whether you can escape all influences or achieve perfect autonomy. The question is whether you can become the primary author of your own life, rather than a character in someone else's story. Here's what I want you to consider. When was the last time you made a significant choice about your career, your relationships, your daily life, without calculating how it would be perceived by others? And more uncomfortably, how much of what you call your personality is actually a performance designed to gain approval, manage perception, and avoid the terrifying freedom of being genuinely yourself? Nietzsche would say that most people never actually live their own lives. They inhabit roles written by others, perform values they never chose, and reach the end having been everyone except themselves. He believed that the highest human achievement isn't success or virtue by conventional standards, but the courage to become who you are rather than who you're supposed to be, even if that means standing alone in your convictions. If this video challenged your assumptions about authenticity or inspired you to question the approval-seeking patterns that may be running your life, leave your like and subscribe to the channel to continue exploring the human psyche through Nietzsche and other depth psychologists. Until the next video,